means that you've chosen track 1, which is outside the farm gate. This track will explore some of the big questions that the renewable sector here in Ireland has. The track will look at stabilising renewable energy into the grid, agribusiness process to reach net zero, the business case for biogas, and a look at the latest research in the sector. We're kicking back off with another panel, stabilising electric energy supply from renewable sources. Joining us to moderate this discussion is Bobby Smith, who is Senior Policy Advisor at Wind Energy Ireland. You're very welcome to the event, Bobby.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this session on Outside the Farm Gate as part of the Farming Renewable Energy Summit 2021. The first panel discussion we have today is on stabilising electricity energy supply from renewable sources. So there'll be a number of topics we're going to talk about today. So smart grids, technology of storage, and balancing supply and demand on the grid at all times. So we have two speakers today with me. The first one is Ellen Diskin. She's the Active System Manager with ESB Networks. So Ellen Diskin is responsible for leading ESB Networks' Active System Management project to deliver the operational systems, market design, and organizational capabilities critically needed to achieve renewable penetration of 70% and above on the Irish electricity system. This project will introduce new products and services to increase system security, renewable penetration, community and market participation in Ireland. Previously as PR5 Manager, Ellen was responsible for leading the development of ESB Networks' investment plan for 2021 to 2025 for approval by the CRU. She has over 10 years experience in the energy industry, working in operations, R&D, regulation and investment planning, and prior to this, Ellen worked in the telecommunications sector. Our second speaker is Christian Kjaer. He's Chief Public Affairs Officer at SuperNode. Christian has been involved in renewable energy for more than 20 years. He was CEO of the European wind energy sector's lobby group Wind Europe in Brussels for 7 years, and the organization's policy director for 4 years prior to that. Christian has been head of unit in the International Renewable Energy Agency in Abu Dhabi, Senior Advisor at the Nordic Council of Ministers Energy Unit, Nordic Energy Research in Oslo, and CEO of the Danish Wind Energy Association, Wind Denmark. So with the introductions over, we might go into just our first topic, which is smart grids. And the first question I kick off is a general question to the panelists. So what does smart grid mean to you when we talk about this kind of fundamental subject? It'd be good to get the perspective from the panelists on both the national level, i.e. managing a system with growing levels of renewables, and at the more local level, i.e. in the context of farms in Ireland. And Ellen, I might start with you, then pass on to Chris.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Bobby. So in Ireland, we are managing and living on enough network to wrap around the globe 4 times. And with that, we are serving and operating as a nation of 2.3 million homes, farms and businesses. And of that, there are roughly 140,000 farms in Ireland. And collectively in Ireland, we've invested in almost as much wind generation as we have peak demand, and over 80% of those wind farms are connected to the distribution system. So the Irish system is inherently really local. Even at a national level, we're local. Now, in Ireland at the moment, we're number 1 in the world for onshore wind generation, and we want to use that electricity network and system that our grandparents built and that our grandchildren will still be using to enable the decarbonisation of Irish society more fully with the electrification of heating and transport and of industry, including in particular agriculture and agri-food. To make that possible, we're going to need to do something different. So in Ireland last year, just under half of all electricity came from renewables, and that's an enormous success. We are thrilled with ourselves, but it's still less than half of our electricity. And so far, we're not actually able to operate fully on renewables because the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. And as an island with no synchronous interconnection, keeping balance and stability is challenging. Now, within 10 years in Ireland, 70% or more of Irish electricity is going to come from renewables. And even just for that 70% average, roughly a third of the time, we're going to have to operate fully on renewables. So that is only going to work if we have ways to coordinate how and when and where we use or store electricity with when and where the sun's shining and the wind's blowing. And for that, we need a smart electricity system or a smart grid. So to me, in an Irish context, certainly, a smart grid means coordinating how and when we use energy on the network to increase the amount of renewable energy that we can use and store. As a society, for Ireland, this is going to be absolutely critical to our ability to secure a low-carbon future. So in the simplest possible terms, we need this. In communities across Ireland, a smart grid means an opportunity to get involved and take ownership of that low-carbon future. And it's a way of getting involved that's affordable and accessible, including in particular for businesses like farms across the country. And ownership is an incredibly fundamental element of our identity in Ireland, and truly feeling ownership of our energy system, owning it through what we do on a smart grid, it's going to be crucial to our ability to meet renewables targets in Ireland. For farms and communities, though, the cost of developing infrastructure or larger scale generation can be prohibitive, and a smart grid means opportunities for farms and communities to take control and get involved in local smart grids and local smart grid markets. It's an opportunity that's open and affordable, and a farm and a community can participate even if they only have micro or quite small scale generation, or actually what they have is automation, so process automation or demand side management. Above all, a smart grid is going to mean changing how and when we use or store or generate electricity individually and in the community. So if every home or farm, and farm I suppose is a good example here, individually adopted microgeneration or electric heating or plant and process automation, and we don't have a smart grid, then pretty quickly what would happen is we'd struggle for electricity network and generation infrastructure. But if those farms, those homes, those businesses are adopting smarter microgeneration, smart heating, smart plant and process automation, then we can develop smart local coordination and localized flexibility markets, which allow us support these technologies connecting more quickly, allow us operate the local network more reliably. We in ESB networks and electricity suppliers can offer new revenue streams and better value to the farms, the homes and the businesses who are participating, and they have an opportunity to be part of something bigger, because a smart grid is an opportunity to be proud of being part of a low or no carbon electricity system in Ireland and to share in the revenues that this will create. And I suppose I'm hoping now Christian has a European perspective to add on that, but certainly that's the Irish perspective on it.
Thanks, Ellen. Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby, and thanks, Ellen. It's a massive task. We're at 40% renewables in Ireland. We need to be at 70 just less than 10 years from now. And the International Energy Agency has just announced in a new report that if we are to meet the Paris goals, the starting point is electrifying, decarbonizing our electricity sector. So we're not talking about decarbonizing by 2050 when it comes to electricity in Ireland and the other advanced economies. We're talking about decarbonizing the electricity system by 2035. It's massive. And I want to say this because we're all very focused on the 70 by 2030. It's a humongous task to get from 40 today to 70 in less than 10 years. But in 14 years, we'll have to get all the carbon out of the system. And I think that's the task. And I think maybe that should be the starting point, is how do we actually get the rest of the carbon out of the system? And that requires an enormous effort by all parts of society, and not least the Irish farmers, as Ellen was saying. So I think it's important that, you know, we need to make sure that we also put a focus on what happens after the 2030 and the 70%, because that's when we're going to start to use electrification in the heating sector, in the transport sector. And that's perhaps even a bigger task, and that change will require investments in grid infrastructure, in upgrades of existing networks, constructing new cables and pylons and substations, and changing the way the consumer is using the electricity, and also ensuring that the consumer becomes a prosumer, starts producing and consuming at the same time in order to stabilize the grid. The obvious example is we'll all be driving electric vehicles, and efficiency has a lot to do in this new paradigm, because the electric engine is 4 to 5 times as efficient as the combustion engine. And we'll go home, we'll plug it into our system, and we might go on to the supermarket. If we have electricity to spare in that car, we might sell some of it back to the grid while we're shopping at the parking lot. So all these things have a huge role, and everything will change fundamentally. And maybe just to also to add from where Ellen also mentioned about the farmer, we're going to need maybe 10 gigawatts of additional capacity over the next decade. We're going to build just in wind energy. We're going to double it up to maybe 8,200 megawatts. And that's going to create thousands of jobs, and it's going to be created. And Irish society should be gaining more than 500 million annually in returns on those investments. And the question, of course, is where is the Irish farmer, and will he be able to invest in renewable projects like wind farms and PV projects? I hope so, because local involvement and co-ownership speeds things up, it eases planning, and you also if you're involved, things go easier. And I think it's important also to look at how do we make sure that the Irish farmers get more involved and just diversify their economy by renting out land to great companies or to other developers. I'm from Denmark, and it was the Danish farmer that gave birth to the Danish wind energy sector. They invested money at a time when no one believed in the technology, and there was probably not fantastic economics in it, but many did it out of ideology. Others did it to make a decent return on the investment, and some of them became extremely wealthy. And at the time, 90% of all wind turbines in Denmark were owned by farmers. The remaining 10% were owned by public power companies that had been dictated that and forced to build them because their government said they must, not because they wanted to. This was in the 90s, and I guess that today, Danish farmers probably only own 10%. And that's a massive change. And if we need to have a big role for the Irish farmer, the Danish farmer has lost out to the likes in Ireland of the EDF and Statkraft and the big developers. We have the same. And that's very, very normal because competitive tenders, as we have today, favor the big ones. And that's just how it is. But we need to find ways of making sure that also farmers can get involved in the ownership. I think that the speed we need to change the sector with is so massive compared to where we came from. And therefore we need everyone to get involved. And there are some options in EU legislations that I'm sure we'll hear about other points at this conference where you can actually go in and make derogation from these competitive tenders. I think competitive tenders are great. We should have them, but maybe we should also look at how we make sure that the people that are going to live with turbines or other projects also get an economic return from hosting them. And there are options to do it, and I hope also the rest of the conference addresses that. I'm sure it will. But it's going to completely, dramatically change everything, and it will need to be smart because otherwise we just can't do it.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, certainly right. A lot of opportunities out there for the likes of Irish farms and even smaller businesses, like the growth in flexible demand going forward with a lot of distributed variable renewable generation on the system is going to be really key. And Ellen, I might just go to you with the next question, just considering your role in active system management and these networks provide a role in the innovation sphere and things like smart meters. When are the types of opportunities we're talking about in terms of smart grids and active system services and products? When will they be available to participants such as Irish farms, and how might they learn more about this?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And to really understand the when, I think first need to get a little bit of an understanding of the geography of this. So the Irish electricity system is actually a lot like Ireland as a whole. It's made up of a network of small communities distributed across the country. There are roughly 3,000 medium voltage networks in Ireland and 250,000 really local low voltage networks. So a medium voltage network is around the size of a community, and a low voltage network it's basically a farmer and his immediate neighbours. So with 140,000 farms in Ireland, there are an average 100 to 140 farms on each rural medium voltage network, and up to half of our really local low voltage networks feed a farm on their neighbours. So in short, that means there are 140,000 farms who we want to be actively participating in a smart electricity system, using their demand, maybe storage, maybe generation or microgeneration. There are 140,000 farms who we want to ensure have access to new and better offerings, both from ESB networks and their suppliers if they adopt the right technologies. And roughly 1,000 localities nationwide where on average 100 to 140 farms could operate as a unit, so could participate, say, as a community together. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities. Now, on the when of it. So in ESB networks, we're planning a rollout of it. And where we're at the moment is high-level design. So we're going to be starting the rollout as such in Ireland early next year. So this year, what we're doing is high-level designs, technology plans, developing the market framework, developing delivery plans. Later this year, we're going to be launching consultations on a lot of these things, as well as launching our first call to tender to participate in a small number of local flexibility or smart grid schemes in Ireland, which will go live next year. In 2022 and 2023, we're going to be piloting relatively small scale at first, but scaling to a region roughly the size maybe of half a county with one or two offerings available nationwide if there's a need aligned with specific Irish energy policy initiatives. So in 2023 and maybe 2022, but certainly 2023, there will begin to be opportunities for farms in a geographic location to participate. And then in 2024 and 2025, that's when we really will get into a rollout nationwide. So that's when this begins to be an option for farmers who are investing in the right technologies, working with suppliers, working with energy companies, maybe working in the community. That's when it'll begin to really be possible nationwide to participate. Now, there are a lot of steps along the way, and I did mention that we're in the depths of planning at the moment. So I suppose I'd urge participants in this conference to register their interest at engagement@esbnetworks.ie, where we're looking for input on things like locations which we should be focusing on the rollout plans for, or specific areas where guidance on technologies or guidance on partnerships would be particularly useful, because from our perspective, it is so critical that the farming community, that people who are using the system are prepared and others are preparing to work with them so that they're able to participate as we roll this out over the next number of years. And in terms of the innovation that we've done in ESB Networks, what I can say is the last decade or so of innovation, technologies that we've trialed for managing active power, managing reactive power, work that's been done down in Dingle in a specific pilot there to see how customers engage with the technologies. These things are being applied. So what's been successful at that is now being applied and transferred into our business as usual as we roll this out.
Great, and thanks very much. That really sounds like an interesting project, and I'm sure lots of people in the industry are really keen to learn more and see how they can participate over the next few years. I might just press on just to the next topic, the technology of storage, just in the interest of time and getting through all the discussion today. We talk about storage, and there's often talk about, let's say, times of no wind or times when there's just no sun and we don't have those that electricity from renewable sources. How do we still get our lights on when we want? How do we still get our electricity supply to meet the demand at all times? And Christian, I might just start with you. Energy storage is getting a lot of focus in that regard, both as kind of the short-term batteries that are providing, let's say, fast frequency response to balance the grid, and also the kind of longer duration storage technologies like hydrogen and other types of, let's say, new developing long duration storage technologies that can balance that long-term supply with demand. But are there other solutions that we're kind of missing here in terms of smart grids, super grids? Are there other solutions that can sit in here, or is energy storage, let's say, the ultimate solution in that regard?
We're going to need massive amounts of storage. I just heard a colleague of mine, Henrik Stiesdale, and he had made a calculation for the Danish system, which is more or less electricity-wise similar to the Irish one. And if you cut off all the interconnectors, you would need 14 gigawatts of offshore wind to power Denmark, 1.4. And that would also require some storage solutions. But if you add just the emissions of one Danish company, admittedly a very large one, Maersk, which is the largest shipping company in the world, if you added their emissions and their fuel demand, and you made that based on hydrogen-derived fuels, you would need 40 additional gigawatts of offshore capacity. So you would need almost 55 gigawatts instead of 14 gigawatts just by adding the fuel demand from Maersk's shipping fleet. It's enormous what we need, both in terms of storage, and storage is needed in particular in those areas where we can't use electricity directly. And this is all about efficiency. We need to use electricity first because it's a more efficient fuel. And that means we need to, Ellen and her colleagues at the ESB and in EirGrid, they're doing a terrific job, and they're going to do an even more challenging job, making sure that they meet, that supply and demand meets all the time in the electricity sector. And then we need some storage solutions such as hydrogen, also to power the transport sector and heating and cooling sectors. And it's going to be massive. But I think the key is that from an efficiency point of view, from a cost point of view, we need to electrify these things that can be electrified. And that also means, and this is where I think perhaps the shaping our electricity future, which is EirGrid's consultation documents, is lacking a bit. There's very little reference to research and innovation on the grid side, and there's very little reference to what are we going to do in terms of using the continent, our interconnectors to the UK, our interconnectors to the continent as storage, because the more we interconnect with our neighboring countries, the more electricity we can directly use in those sectors where that makes sense. And then we're going to need all kinds of other storage, but using electricity to produce hydrogen, to store it, and then make it back to electricity, you're losing vast amounts of energy in that conversion. And therefore, when you can directly use electricity, you should use that. And that's where you need to have very strong connections to the continent, to the UK, also to connect the offshore wind farms. So the idea of having, just as Ireland, most of the renewables resources in Ireland are sitting on the fringes, and the demand is in the center. That's true for the entire European continent. You have probably 85% of the offshore potential is going to be in the North Sea, in the Irish Sea, and in the Atlantic Sea, and the demand is in the middle of Europe, away from the coasts. And that needs to be that. If we're going to do this at a European level, not only at an Irish level, we need interconnectors, and probably Ireland needs it more than most, also because we have ambitions to export electricity, because we've got great resources in Ireland. So storage, great, it'll be needed. We absolutely need it, but we need it first and foremost to those difficult to electrify sectors such as aviation, shipping, and industry.
Absolutely, Christian. Yeah, I think the Irish government has set a target of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. So that's definitely going to be a lot of export potential there that could be fed to the continent. So,
yeah, it would probably also be difficult for Ellen to integrate 30 gigawatts.
Yeah, that might be pushing it a bit. Ellen, just next to you. Thanks very much, Christian. Ellen, just on that kind of vein, what are the types of technologies you see to integrate renewables out to 2030? And potentially, are there opportunities for Irish farms to participate in some of these new opportunities?
Absolutely. So firstly, Christian, I'm going to defend my colleagues in EirGrid and say, yeah, in their shaping consultation, they weren't going to be necessarily going into the demand side that strong, because their focus has been on the renewable generation, whereas on the demand side, that is where there's an onus on the distribution system operator to get involved. So to your question, Bobby. Okay, first question. For farms that are considering participating in the Irish electricity system, and for farms who want to contribute to that managing of renewables and seeing how we can consume it, as Christian was saying, because it is a clean and efficient source. First question is, okay, what technologies are you looking at? Are you looking at, and I'm going to say storage or managing demand, because the two of them they're two sides of the one coin. So for the farm, one, are you looking at automating some of your farm processes? Could you schedule your activities? Can you allow heating and cooling, say, for your stock, also for milk, other food projects, to be adjusted slightly under some circumstances? Because if you are, there is an opportunity for demand side management. In your home or on your buildings, are you looking at replacing your oil-fired heating with a heat pump or adopting an electric vehicle? Is it that you're installing micro or mini generation on some of your roof space, or is it that you're looking at investing in larger scale generation on your land, so a wind turbine or some solar panels at scale? Once you've that sorted, so whichever or whatever combination of those technologies you are looking to invest in, the key issue is, how do you make it smart grid ready? Because it's being smart grid ready that makes these technologies able to participate in the system, able to allow us better coordinate with the renewable generation. So with any of the generation options, and particularly with microgeneration, installing battery storage or some sort of storage as well will make a big difference in terms of the smart grid offering that you're going to be able to secure and the value that you're going to be able to get out of your generation asset. Now, I'm saying that in particular for microgeneration because the regulatory enablers are already in place for battery storage with microgeneration, whereas for larger batteries connected along with solar or wind farms, there's still some regulatory work needed to make that an option. Next really big question is, are the technologies that you're installing smart? They need to be the smart option for you to be able to avail of smart grid options. So you might be able to retrofit down the line if you don't have a smarter technology, but that's an additional cost and time and complexity that you don't need. So is your generation inverter or your microgeneration inverter a smart inverter? Is your heat pump remotely controllable? Is your vehicle charger a smart charger for your process automation? What protocols can your control system speak to receive a remote signal? For larger scale generation, there's distribution code and grid code requirements already in place that make it relatively straightforward to answer these questions. But for the smaller alternatives, or the demand side ones or the storage ones, that in and of themselves are generally more affordable and accessible, the standards for smartness aren't quite as mature in Ireland. They're developing well internationally though. So my organisation and other organisations in Ireland, like the NSAI, are working to adapt and adopt international standards to ensure that the equipment that we buy in Ireland is readily available on the international or domestic markets. And put simply, invest in the smart technology, choose storage along with your micro and mini generation, and you're on the road to being able to participate in the system, able to avail of new smart grid offerings and participate in local markets for electricity services. If you don't, you won't be.
Thanks very much, Ellen. Yeah, certainly, definitely the technologies are one thing, but then making them smart is another thing, I suppose, and allowing them to integrate properly with the grid and the SOs, to the system operators, to be able to effectively utilize them is kind of another step. So definitely keen to learn more about that project, and it's a very interesting piece of work. I might just jump on to the final topic of today, the balancing supply and demand and managing peak demands. So this is a fundamental issue of how we ensure that when we flick the lights on, we get power when we need it and when we want it. So this is something that it's going to be an increasing challenge on the system going forward with ever-growing amounts of renewable generation, but it's something that I'm sure Ellen and our colleagues are keen on managing and taking on that challenge over the next decade or so. But I might start with you, Ellen, then from there, from the system operator perspective, why is this such an important concept, and how can Irish farms play a role in helping manage that balance?
Okay, right. So my team have been doing a lot of work in forecasting and analysis of the Irish electricity system nationally and right down to the most local level for over the coming decade. And what they're identifying is that as we connect more and more renewable generation and micro and mini generation and storage, there's more and more of a need for local demand and storage to coordinate with that generation. If we don't, then what happens is that all or an awful lot of the wind and solar farms and the microgeneration, they're competing for space on the network locally. They end up needing to be exported up to the transmission system, and either on the way to the transmission system or on the transmission system itself, they can hit bottlenecks. And those bottlenecks are no good for anybody because they mean effectively that the energy has to be spilled and it doesn't get used and it probably doesn't get paid for. If we can level supply and demand more locally through home automation, building automation, process automation on the farm and the associated processing facilities and storage, then that low carbon, relatively low cost energy gets used locally. And as a result, carbon emissions go down and the renewable energy doesn't get spilled and we are using more efficient energy. And we've numbers for what that looks like over the coming decades, and that goes down to every single locality, pretty much down to the townland over the coming decade. We're going to be publishing that later this year. And there are a lot of different scenarios for when and where generation and storage, and also electric heating and transport connect. So there are different pathways for what this may look like. But what we're finding is that as the scenarios vary, there are still certain localities and counties and even regions, and a number of them are really quite rural, where this leveling of demand and supply is going to be really valuable in almost any scenario for the next decade. And in terms of the role that Irish farms can play, so I said we're putting numbers on when and where and how much of this coordination of demand and supply are needed. What we're doing next is trying to put a value on it. And later this year, we're going to be consulting on proposals for how we use this value to create localized marketplaces. So in those localized marketplaces, farmers will be able to offer their demand side response or their storage or changes in their generation, and for that to be paid for. And they'll be able to do that individually potentially, but there are probably better offerings for them if they can work with electricity suppliers or energy management companies, or a new kind of energy company called an aggregator to participate, because those companies will be able to develop offerings for farmers that don't just use the local network marketplace value, which will be an important part, but can also secure value for what you get from this in terms of lower wholesale energy prices. So there are going to be opportunities to participate right across Ireland. I think the next step really is getting a plan in place for localized marketplaces so people can start seeing the route to market in my area.
Great, thanks very much, Ellen. And I think we've got a couple of minutes left, so Christian, I might give you the last word, if that's okay. You know, this fundamental issue of electricity being needed to be supplied when people exactly want it. How can that be managed with 70% RESI and a decarbonised electricity system going forward?
I think Ellen has pointed to the challenges at the local level, and that's massively important that we get all these smart technologies out to where the consumers are, making sure that they can also be prosumers. We also need to go the other way. We need to go to the macro scale and look at what, how do we develop a system where all European countries need to decarbonize their economies, not their power sector, by 2050, including the farmers. And what is electricity's role in this? And as I said before, that requires decarbonizing electricity. That's the first step, so that we can use clean electricity to decarbonize transport and heating and the other sectors. And that's massively important, and that's why we need a plan. We need a European plan. At the moment, it's at best regional, where the regions go out, cooperate, say we'll put an interconnector here. We're talking to the Belgians and the French, but there is no European plan, and that needs to be done, because otherwise we're going to sink a lot of investments. If we do it nationally, if we do it regionally, we're going to make decisions that are just not optimal and which will not give us the lowest cost energy. So we certainly need to start in 2050 saying this is a decarbonized economy. Where does energy fit into that? And energy is 75% of the emissions. And what's electricity's role? And then work backwards from that. And we really, really don't have a lot of time. We've been doing great in the last 100 years developing our power systems and the rest of our energy systems. And we've been going along, and renewables integration in the last 10 years has happened fast, but it's nowhere near what needs to be done over the coming 1, 2, 3 decades. It's going to be massive, and we need to plan for that, and we need to do that together with the European Union, the UK and Norway and whoever else is in our vicinity, including Africa to the south. And that's where super grids and those kind of new technologies that my company is developing would also come in once we've got developed. And that's you can say that's the big scale at a European level, and it's equally important to the integration at the local scale, and the two needs to meet in a plan that goes all the way down from the individual farm and municipalities and up to the European Union and beyond, because it needs to go beyond the European Union.
That's a good way to summarize it, Christian, and that's I think a good way to leave it as well. There's quite a lot of challenges, but no lack of effort and dedication to get where we need to go, and quite a lot of opportunities for, let's say, Irish farms over the next decade or so to participate in these types of smart grids, and both at the local and then at the European level as well. So yeah, thanks very much, Ellen and Christian, for that discussion. Very interesting topic, and I think we'll leave it there for today. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Some great insights and food for thought. Our next panel is moderated by Dr. Niamh Power,